Welcome to episode 3 of the podcast. Michael always
Podcast.
takes a while to say
Oh
the
yeah,
name.
the podcast name is Attack for 20, and your hosts are Yanji and me, Michael. And today we have a special guest.
Hello, everybody. Brendan Patrick from Arsenal Pass. Nice to be here, Michael. Thank you for letting me stay at your place this week in New York. Cleveland upcoming this weekend. We play the Ohio format.
Yeah, in Mansfield, Ohio, the Realm Games, they're having a 10K. Um, yeah, I guess, Jan, do you want to introduce Brendan to the guys who might not know him?
Yeah, if to formally introduce Brendan, he's a co-host of Arsenal Pass along with Hayden Dale, finalist for one of the first callings, TC Austin, top 8 of the Calling Dallas, star of my sleeves that I use.
Those sleeves are hilarious.
Yeah.
I'm working on getting new sleeves for France. I gotta actually place the order, I think, this upcoming week. Thanks for coming on our show. You said that you're staying with Michael, so you want to give everyone kind of a little bit insight as to what you're doing in the New York City, New Jersey area.
So, yeah, I'm here for a conference this week, mostly for work. But it just lined up really nicely going to Cleveland. It's like significantly easier to go to Cleveland from New York than it is from Dallas. I think that like flights recently have been kind of crazy with like a lot of
Oh yeah,
cancellations
definitely.
and yeah, so it was just way easier to go from New York anyway. So it lined up nice. Did come out here for work and like I've actually I've been to New York like 10 years ago for a college tour or something, and I hated it because it was 20 degrees and sunny and windy, and I was just like, this is terrible. But I came here a month ago, obviously for the pro tour, and then again now, and I really like it. Like, I think I'm gonna travel here more often. At least Manhattan, just for visiting. There's something about the city that just like speaks to my soul, like the chaos and the filth. I love
The
it.
Phil.
Yeah, the filth.
Yeah, I don't know. 20 degrees and windy and sunny sounds great to me.
Oh my God, it was I can't do that. I can do cold if it looks cold outside, but if it looks warm outside and then it's cold, it's
I
just
see.
I think
It's
it
like a
triggers like some animal
mental.
instinct in me that's just like get me out of here.
It's like shock. For a lot of the people who might be listening to our podcast, maybe they just got into the game a little bit more recently. But you've been playing Flesh and Blood for a pretty long time now. And I mentioned it during the intro that you're one of the finalists for the Calling Austin, which is kind of like when Flesh and Blood first started as a game before it got like a boom in popularity during the COVID kind of era.
That calling was like 2019, right?
That calling was 2019. I think it was it's either in October or September or August.
Yeah,
One of the three.
in the fall.
It's funny. That was the Calling Austin was actually my first card game tournament ever.
Oh, really?
I didn't play card games before. I just play it. So I picked up Flesh and Blood by just my local game store is like one of the 4 stores in America to have it. I walked in and just impulse bought some decks, like the old constructed hero decks, the ones you could just buy out of the box. Got some Ira decks, got a box, and then was just playing a lot of tabletop with my partner at the time and fell in love with it. I remember I had a lot of success locally because obviously everybody was terrible. Um, and I I went to the Calling Austin, and the first person I played was Sasha Markovic, and I lost, and I was like, I am screwed because basically like I probably reinforced a ton of just terrible habits and bad ideas
Yeah.
in my local scene. But yeah, I mean, I met James and Sasha there, and we really hit it off. With able to top 8 it, lose to Sasha in the finals, and then we all got dinner after, and I think it was like at that dinner I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna commit all this prize money or whatever to just going to New Zealand, which is probably one of I thought that that was where my story was going to end, right? Is like I got to play well, it's like I got to play this card game and I get to travel this like amazing country for like 2 weeks that I probably wouldn't have visited for like 10, 20 years or just ever in my life. And that was like an incredible experience, but obviously that has led to a kind of ridiculous life change. Like Flesh and Blood absolutely changed my life. Like I travel all over the U.S. now. Hayden and I, we've started Arsenal Pass, all this stuff. So my life 2 years ago was massively different.
Yeah.
Dude, that's
And
great.
and that when Brendan said James, he actually means James White, which for most of us we call him James White because we don't have that first thing he uses.
Yeah.
When I was at Brendan's place after Dallas, I got to see a picture of you
Yeah.
with him, and I guess that was taken at the Calling Austin.
Yeah.
3
James
years
is
ago.
he's a really good guy. Like back then, Flesh and Blood was very small. So I remember we took him to like this like chain-esque like Tex-Mex restaurant. You know, he's from New Zealand, and New Zealand has an incredible cuisine and
Mm-hmm.
very good food. And we got him some queso, which is effectively just melted cheese that you eat with like tortilla chips.
Wait,
And
it's
he
it's
lost.
like 4 melted cheeses.
Yeah. Well, he lost his mind. It was like the greatest food he's ever had in his life. He ordered a second appetizer dish, and he was just like, "I'm coming back to Texas just for queso."
That's so funny.
But yeah, when I went to the Calling Auckland, he actually like drove me to armories and stuff.
That's crazy.
Like him
Oh,
picked me up
man.
and drove me to armories.
That's
So
a pretty
very,
wild experience.
yeah, different game back then for sure.
That's actually a pretty good segue. I think one of the first things that I wanted to kind of ask you about is nowadays, especially like the higher level competitive events where like in these like huge convention center halls, like hundreds of players. Can you just like give a picture for everyone who's listening what entering some of like early stages, like what armories maybe were like, and then also like what the callings were like
Yeah,
in.
so armories were pretty interesting. I remember we had like bribed like these 5 kids to like try to show up to our limited armories. They did for a bit, but then they stopped. So like armories were like not a thing too. Like we kind of had them near me, but even then not really, and they didn't catch on for like actually a long time. The early calling, so yeah, the calling Austin was 34 people. They actually rented out a conference center, like a venue, and then nobody signed up. I think the pre signups was like 3 people. And so it ended up being in a game store in Austin, and they were like wildly unprepared to host this tournament.
Yeah.
And James, you can really tell Flesh and Blood that it's been like the ideation behind the game was for it to be successful and was for it to be what it is today. So I remember James was like much more serious about the tournament than literally everybody in the store. It was just like it was just another day in the game store.
Yeah.
But yeah, like 34 people, which is yeah, it's got to be one of the softest callings ever. But unfortunately, there was Mr. Sasha Markovic also there, so had to beat the end boss to win, which was pretty tough. And yeah, it was just it was an interesting time. Nobody really knew how to play. You know, there was a massive difference between quote unquote good players and bad players.
Mhm.
So it was pretty reasonable to top 8 that tournament. I think at the time because your early rounds were relatively easy. I think the craziest thing is, I remember back then. Obviously, we all knew about like Magic the Gathering and Grand Prix and Pro Tours and like that was all the future, right? That was like an idea. And I really felt like it had the possibility, but there's so much logistics to go into like the partnerships, the venues, the chain of fireball, like none of that existed. And I remember when I first went to the first Vegas calling for the Tales of Aria World premiere and then the Classic Constructed calling, I felt like that's when it hit me when it's like, okay, this is a thing, you know?
Yeah, I actually was pretty surprised when you said that you hadn't played any card games prior to Flesh and Blood. I was actually going to ask you about that a little bit later when we're talking about limited, but I think for Michael and I, like we both have like a MTG background, and so it I would have had like a severe culture shock if I was at like a 30 something person event with like the creator of the game. It just been like a completely different like experience, like tournament experience than what I was used to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's for me like that was the biggest tournament I've ever been to, which is pretty funny. And the most serious. It felt serious.
Yeah,
But yeah, obviously nothing like it is today when you show up to the Pro Tour and it's very curated. We have professional judges, we have coverage, we have like all these people that like it's so funny that like now we have like brands that are based in Flesh and Blood. Like we have entire content creator brands, we have people that have their identities built off the game. It's like it's become so much more than just a game.
yeah, that's great. Hopefully, still some growth to come.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
I wanted to shift gears and talk about podcasting. So we're on episode 2. We're just like starting off, but you and Hayden have kind of been like running the train. Arsenal Pass has to be like definitely the one of the most subscribed to podcasts in Flesh and Blood, but also probably like one of the longest running ones as well. So I guess I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about kind of like how you guys first decided to start like podcasting?
Yeah, so it was it was pretty opportunity based, to be honest. I had gotten obviously I knew Sasha from these tournaments, and Sasha introduced me to Hayden, and I casted remotely. I casted like the first Blitz calling, and that's where I met Hayden Dale. And we had been in touch after, and he had approached me, and like I'd wanted to do content. I'd started writing for Channel Fireball. Hayden was writing as well, which is a bit of an unfulfilling occupation, to be honest, is writing those articles. So it wasn't my thing. So like YouTube, maybe, I don't know. I'd never done any of that stuff. And Hayden approached me. He's like, "Do you?" He was so coy about it. That's what was funny. He's like, "Yeah, do you know about any kind of like limited resources as channels for Fab?" Like, I was like, no. I was like, I remember eventually just got around to it, and he was like, maybe we should start one. I was like, okay, seriously. So Session Blood, which was it's funny because Session Blood was, I think that at their height, they were a lot smaller than Arsenal Pass is, but you gotta understand, like back then there was like no content and they were just super dominant. Like
Mm-hmm.
very, very dominant. They were the only podcast, effectively. And they had announced they were going to work for Legendary Studios, which obviously meant that, the podcast was going to stop, at least in its weekly capacity.
Right.
And Hayden and I were just like, well, yeah, I guess that's a good opportunity to hop in here. So we started a podcast. We started with the Monarch Limited set review. Our initial idea for the podcast was actually just limited. We were just going to do limited. We were just going to do draft, and we were going to do limited set reviews, and that was it. So since then, I think a scope has crept a little bit, and the stuff we cover is maybe a bit more broad. But yeah, basically, we saw an opportunity in the market. Neither of us had podcasted. I don't think neither of us were like, you know, particularly like podcast maxis or anything. Like it's just a really nice form of content, right? We didn't want to edit videos on YouTube, which unfortunately we do now, and we didn't want to have to like do super curated content, which is kind of what we do now anyway.
So I guess podcasting is the path to doing what you don't want to do.
The gateway drug.
Yeah, it really is the gateway drug. I mean, there was a time I remember it's actually like December 2021, like right when there was like that winter of no Fab content.
Oh,
Where Hayden and
yeah.
I we had committed to like, one gameplay video week, like one other video week, and it was just like, I remember we had a conversation where it's like, why are we doing this? Like the whole reason we did that, the whole philosophy behind this channel was to not do this, right? It was like to just do content that we want to, that's impactful. And we like
Yeah.
had this sort of like quota based content, and we actually scaled it back significantly. So like we still do gameplay, we still do videos outside of the podcast, but not like on a sort of KPI basis anymore, not like a one gameplay week or anything like that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because I think for us, since we're also just kind of like starting out, we're hoping to get like some tips and tricks. Like, what were some of like the early like pitfalls? I know like for us, for example, just like listening to our recordings and stuff, I'm finding like things that we can improve on, just like talking to each other on a week to week basis.
Yeah, so the easiest one is consistency. So you like literally just have to, like, if you commit to weekly, you do weekly and you release at the same time every week. And that's how you get an audience, because your audience will build. So like you're probably going to start out with like a more value and oriented podcast, but then over time you're going to build an audience that just likes you for you, and they just listen to you, and they kind of have like a parasocial relationship with the podcast, and either they listen to it on their work or they listen to it while they mow the lawn, et cetera, et cetera. And those are the people that build the backbone of what your podcast really is. And to get there, I think you have to be consistent, and your personalities have to shine through as well. I think like ultra curated content is good for its use case, but ultimately it doesn't build that deeper connection. So I think consistency and just sort of staying true to like kind of like your mission. Like I think it's important to understand like what your podcast is trying to deliver, like what's its core competency, et cetera, et cetera. And then like audio quality is big. We struggled with audio quality for like literally a year. Like so many trials and errors. It's such a pain in the butt. But once you get it down, it's done. You never have to touch it again. It is done.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are the biggest ones for me, is audio quality and consistency, and then just I guess marketing to an extent. So we were really lucky. We didn't have to do marketing to an extent because Session Blood stopped, and then we came on, and we were both like, we were at that time we were both pretty accomplished players, so it was really easy to get like an initial basis, which is the hardest part. Hardest part is at the beginning, getting your initial audience. After that, it's more organic.
Mm-hmm.
So we were lucky to kind of skip that phase. And then, yeah, when we started Arsenal Pass, which I guess is like 60 weeks ago now, or like 63, there was literally no content. Like if you went on YouTube, you search gameplay, you would find almost no gameplay.
I remember Michael
So
telling me at the beginning, he was like trying
yeah,
to he was struggling. I think he was like looking through these like grainy, like low res,
yeah,
whatever
hated it.
videos.
yeah, low res and like pretty. Yeah, so it'd be like the skill, the kind of like, or like the competitive levels like varied just like wildly. And,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was pretty easy to get into that market. I think starting a podcast like or a channel now in Flesh and Blood is probably it's significantly more challenging. I think it's less challenging if you have accolades, right? So if you have calling wins, stuff like that. If it's just personality based, I think that's what ultimately will build a sustainable brand.
Yeah.
But it makes the beginning really hard, and I think the beginning is where everybody quits.
Yep.
All right, good thing we don't have to we don't have to worry about the first part. Although we have to keep winning callings, otherwise they'll stop listening to us.
I wanted to just inject a little question that I thought about while you were talking about the early days of podcasting. Brendan, you mentioned that initially you guys just wanted to focus on limited. And I know you kind of have talked about this in the podcast itself, but could you kind of just share some of those reasonings with us here?
Yeah, so like even back then, even though there was almost no content, we wanted to focus on a niche, right? Because that's how you I think that's how you carve out like a market share. It's like you figure out like a specific audience that wants a specific thing and you attack that. Because if you just come in, you're like, we're gonna be a Flesh and Blood podcast. It's like about what, right?
Yeah,
There's actually like now obviously it's not statistically true, but there's like a million, right? So how do you find one that actually like that you want to listen to? Because even if people listen to your first episode, it's still an investment. How do you get them to invest their time?
Right.
And I think if it's like, all right, we're a limited set review. Like that's an easy flagship product. Maybe not anymore because there's a bunch of them, but back then, like being the only like very like curated, you got images, you got video, and it's very limited resources esque, which a lot of people have watched and kind of sort of empathize with. Like that being your flagship product is like an easy way to break in. Nowadays, yeah, I mean, you just gotta like that's why we. But to answer your question, that's why we focused on limited. It's like
sense.
we saw what limited resources did,
Yep.
and we're like, oh, we could do that in Flesh and Blood. Because like if we had approached it, so from the angle that we ended up becoming, right, which is sort of like all encompassing and more conversational, I think we might have been less successful because I think the focus and the scope and just like trying to target a specific audience is important. And our audience is the one they pushed us to expand, right? So I think that we expanded organically, but initially I think you want to focus on a niche.
Yeah. Limited resources is that Magic the Gathering,
Yeah.
Limited Podcast, Marshall Sutcliffe, LSU.
Exactly, yeah.
And I mean, they are the flagship. Like back when I was playing a lot more Magic, I would literally listen through every single set review, and their set reviews are like 2 hours and a half, two and a half hours. They would rate every single card. Marshall would give a grade. LSU would give a grade. People would make Google sheets where they would have all the like. This was a thing. Like so, I think that makes total sense. I'm really glad that you guys took that stab. I think it was one of the reasons you guys became so successful.
Yeah, I mean, to put in perspective, I didn't play Magic and I listened to limited resources.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, yeah, I've had an interesting relationship with Magic. I've actually kind of like retroactively, like not really gone and played it, but just like studied it. Like I went back and like I learned like a bunch of formats via like watching pro tours or like competitive events around like certain cycles, whether it's a standard or modern. And like I didn't play any of that Magic, like, but I know a lot of the formats because I went back and I watched it, and I just found like because I don't know, I found this stuff fascinating. It's very entertaining, and I feel like that's where Flesh and Blood is going, right? Like that's our future.
That's pretty cool. Do you think it helps you as a player? Not necessarily like to study Magic.
Yeah, so as a player, probably not as like from a competitive standpoint, but it helps me from like I think like just perspective, right? And especially as a content creator, because like most of Flesh and Blood has come from that Magic base, right? So being able to understand sort of I think the granularity and the detail of the game, especially its history, so how it's evolved, like really helps to make some of the content that we do for Flesh and Blood more palatable.
Yeah, I think there's like a lot of things in Magic that we kind of just take for granted in Flesh and Blood. Just like even things like the tournament structure,
Yep.
having a top 8 cut, like there's just these things that like I think as a former Magic player, it's just like an easy transition. The callings are just so similar to what Grand Prix used to be, but I feel like I've had people ask me like, oh, like what happened like, in that tournament? Like, did you win? I'm like, no, I just made the top 8. Oh, what's that? And I'm like, whoa,
Well,
take a step back. What? So that is kind of cool that you studied. I totally didn't know that either.
yeah. I'm one of those players too. I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't know what top 8 was.
Yeah.
I didn't know what Swiss was. Like, what is like those words? They're funny because they're so non-descriptive. It's
Yeah.
like, what is going on? And then I love how like we use a bunch of Magic terms, right? They're like, oh, like I'm gonna have an anthem effect or thought sees you or
Mhm,
this, and you're like, if you don't know Magic, it's like there's people shortcut a lot of Magic, famous Magic cards is like
Mulligan.
mechanics. Yeah, Mulligan, all that stuff.
So you said that you started doing Arsenal Pass as like a limited podcast. We filmed a recorded like a complete Uprising or incomplete Uprising set review. I don't think that's ever gonna get released, but I wanted to get kind of some of your thoughts on Uprising. Have you played any drafts so far? I saw on
Yeah,
Twitter.
one draft.
I saw on Twitter you posted that you had got a loot bag of Uprising packs.
Yep. I did get So I only played one draft though, so we ended up opening a lot of our packs that we won in the world premiere because Michael and I both went 6-0, so we had 2 boxes. Michael paper handed his box in less than 5 minutes. Some dude for $100, which is ridiculous.
This is Michael Hamilton, not me.
Yeah, Michael Hamilton, which I would have paid like $200 for his box alone. He was in my house, but money's money. The story is like we went 6-0. We were taking a picture. Some guy comes up to me and he was like, "Hey, Brendan, can I buy your box?" It's like, absolutely not. And he had $100 in his hand, and Michael literally just gives him his box. Doesn't even say anything, just hands him a box, takes the money. I was like, I remember on Sunday, I was like stressed to get packed so Hayden and I could do content. And
I think I was offering like 120 at the time.
Yeah, on Sunday I probably would have paid $200. Like, to be honest, I remember I couldn't even buy packs. I went to Magnolia, or not Magnolia, but
Min-max?
Yeah, one of the stands, and I was like, guys, I will literally pay triple for the packs. I just need 6 packs, and they're like, we can't sell it to you. But yeah. So Uprising in general, I like the sealed format. I enjoy it. It's good. Like I think it's good. I think it's a good sealed format. It feels more welcome to Wraithy. Like I don't feel like I'm just vomiting my hand every time. Like I might do some blocking and might have to think about a turn cycle, which is it's really refreshing coming from Tales of Aria, which I think it's not the worst in my opinion. It's not the worst sealed format because I think Arcane Rising will just always take the cake there. But I didn't really like Tales of Aria sealed mostly because I haven't played it since the Briar Errata, so I've heard it's significantly better, but. Yeah, the sealed format in Tales I wasn't a fan of, but I really like draft. And in this format, I think it might be the opposite. I think I like sealed, and I'm not super sure how I feel about draft yet. Just because, I'm just a little unsure about like Dramai and the archetypes, and also Icelander as well. Like, I feel like in Icelander is the one that's particularly interesting to me. I just need more exposure to because I feel like in Icelander there's a big difference between the good cards and the bad cards, and like I think that although you can support multiple Icelander drafters in a pod, I think that there's like one Icelander who has the better deck, while the other one is like I'm not so sure about yet. And then Jermaine I just don't know how good Fi is. Like if it's good enough to sort of kind of be super consistent into draft, et cetera, et cetera. And the archetypes, right? Like are there sub archetypes that exist outside of the classes themselves? So like one of these would be like, you're like mono Centipede because there's no breakers or something.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So I'm just interested to dive more into it. I did like the sealed format, even though it looked like Fi was pretty dominant in the early days.
Yep.
Like I think that Icelander is really good, and I think that Jeremiah can be pretty reasonable if you get the cards as well.
Yeah, we also thought that the format felt a lot like WTR. Although the conclusions that we came to, I think, are a little bit different.
What are your conclusions on Uprising so far? Because you guys have played a lot more limited. I mean, I'm in Jersey. I'm staying with Michael, and I think he's been playing a draft almost every night.
Yeah, we this will be episode 3, and episode 2 we kind of go over what our like overall thoughts on draft are, but kind of like a brief recap is that I think like the biggest change from Uprising to like any of the previous sets is that you only draft 42 playable cards.
Mhm.
And so you kind of get like are pigeonholed into like committing into a hero like a lot earlier, especially because kind of like the mechanic that they use to offset the picks like Phoenix Flames is really realistically only like good for Fi.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
and
there's like no Phoenix Flame for Icelander, and also it's like a triple whammy. There's less cards to draft. The equipment are actually worth a pick, and shoot, less cards to draft. The equipment are actually worth a pick, and oh, there's less generics. Like in
Mhm.
Welcome to Wraith, you had 4 generics per pack.
Mhm.
Here you have like one.
yeah,
Yeah.
So there's just a lot more pressure to kind of pick and then put the blinders on.
So, how do you guys feel about like pack distribution and reading signals? Because in Tails, I felt like it was pretty reasonable, but in Monarch, it was wild. Like Monarch was just like such the wild. It was just such a Wild West format for actually being in the correct hero. Because sometimes you could get packs with literally all light cards, and you're like, you may be seeing that pick four,
yeah,
and you're like, oh, obviously everybody's in Shadow here or something like that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the
yeah.
distribution could just be crazy.
I think the pack breakdown, Michael did the pack breakdown, but like sometimes you get packs that there's like 4 ice cards
Yeah, yeah.
and like one or
Two
two
ice to
wizards.
generic. Yep.
Yeah, and you get like 1 or 2 wizard cards. And then so when you like pass the pack, you can pass the pack and then there's still like 1 or 2 like good ice cards. Icelander can look really open. It is kind of like what you were saying, like for Monarch can be like kind of a toss up. Uh I think like what you're looking for in terms of signals is like a little bit different. At least for me, like the heroes don't have to be as open, but you gotta like get in early.
So you think by pack one? Well, I mean, how deep in a pack one are you committed to your hero? Do you think?
Dude, I feel like I'm committing by like pick 4.
Yeah.
Wow.
Uh yeah. I'm on the same page. Like if I just feel like if you want a 3-0 the draft,
Mhm.
it really rewards people who have kind of picked a few good cards in that hero early and basically quote unquote got rewarded. I've tried staying open and like no matter who I end up going, you just don't get that many picks to kind of dirtle around in this format.
What is like the risk portfolio for each hero? Like, are you pretty safe to be into Fi? Is it really risky to draft Icelander? Like, how bad is it if I draft
Mm.
Icelander and there ends up being like 2 more, and I find out, maybe pick 7, pick 8, and I'm like, oh god, I don't even know if my deck's gonna work now. And like, how does Dramai fit into that too?
Michael, do you want to go over your 1.5?
Yeah, I've talked about the 1.5, 2.5, 3.5 with Brendan, but I guess mathematically we can't prove it. But just looking at the breakdown of packs and looking at the last few drafts we've done, I think we've done 4 or 5. Um, it does feel like the lowest floor is Dromai. Like
Mhm.
you can get a really bad Dromai deck, almost non-playable, non-functional Dromai deck, just because there's just not enough. Like if you are the third Dromai drafter, it is possible you don't even have 30 cards. You're forced to play Phoenix Flame, not because you want to, but because you have to.
Mhm.
Um, there's just not enough good cards. There's like Sand Cover on average, so it's going to be like 4 or 5, and I don't think that's a card I want against non-Icelander most of the time. Definitely don't
Sometimes
want
I
it
just don't
against
ever
Romai.
want it.
Yeah, I think against Icelander I could see a world where I want it, but it's just like that the way we've been playing it. Maybe it's wrong. Maybe we have to like rethink how we fundamentally play Dromai games. But Ash is usually a little bit at a premium.
Mhm.
And then by that corollary, Icelander would also be basically Fi has the highest floor. Like if you're
Mhm.
gonna pivot, we recommend pivoting into Fi. Last night we did a draft and I ended up pivoting into Icelander. And I had exactly 30 playables. I had no sideboard cards. Like every I went in pack 3 and I could only have like one off pick, and there was one pack that just like didn't have any Icelander cards, and I was so mad because it's so hard for you not to have an Icelander card in the pack. Ended up being the third Icelander drafter, and that's just like the fun like the fluctuations. Like I've opened packs where you have 6 Icelander cards, so you have 2 ice cards in the front, 2 wizard cards in the back. The third random is a wizard card, and then like either a rare or foil is a wizard. Like you could have 7, like theoretically you have 7, but that pack just didn't have any. and then I just had 30 playables, and that was just my deck. I just don't recommend it. Like I ended up going 1-2 with that deck. The floor is just so much lower for the other non-Fey heroes, and that's just kind of what we think right now. Like everything is like liable to change.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I was talking to Michael a little bit earlier today is that so like normally in 3-pack formats, so Flesh and Blood hasn't yet done a draft format where there's like multiple sets within the same draft. So when you have 3 packs that are all the same, usually it's better to receive good signals to like understand who the people are passing you into you are going than it is to send signals. And that's just virtue of the fact that 2 of the packs, that's like what's going to affect you, and then 1 of the packs you're going to get affected by what signals you send. But I think for Uprising draft, because like the margins are so tight, I also feel kind of compelled to like send good signals as well. You can ask Michael. Normally I don't care at all about the signals that I send.
Yes, I have been bamboozled, backstabbed, betrayed. I hate getting passed by Yanji. I have no idea what he's picking. I think he's on something, and then we end the draft. I'm like, how?
Oh yeah, but it's just like, but I think Uprising really rewards you for like being like a good partner to the person you're passing into. I think there was like one draft recently where I got past the pack and there was like 2 red 5 starters plus a Blaze Headlong, and I just picked like a red Ice Bolt because I just didn't want to like take like pass like good 5 cards and then have like the person who I'm passing into be 5. The person who's passing into me ended up also being like in 5. And he was asking me after the draft how I like dodged like going into Draconic. To me right now, it's the format seems a little random, I guess is the best way that I can describe it.
Yeah, it's I like to call it the Ixalan format, where you just put your head down, put your blinders on, and cross your fingers and pray and hope that you get rewarded. And I don't know, that's just because like for me, winning a draft is the most important part. Like 2-1ing a draft, I think is like that's okay. But like I really want to win drafts. And I think that's kind of like I don't know how I feel about winning the draft. Like I feel like you can kind of stay a little open and you increase your chances of 2-1ing, but you significantly decrease your chances of 3-0ing.
Yeah.
So
what do you guys think about in Tales of Aria? I felt like there was mostly in Seal, but I felt like there was some mildly annoying cards like Channel Heroic and Awakening. And Oakenol to an extent. I think that Flesh and Blood traditionally has not had a lot of bombs or massively impactful cards on on their own, like just their play in kind of like a vacuum. What do you feel about this set? So like some cards that sort of stand out to me are like Necria, Uprising.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, those in particular. Do you like how are there some powerful cards that you think just sort of stand away from the pack?
Dude, Necria is like the card. I told Michael, like I don't even want to play Ice Dromai, but Necria is like one of the only cards that like makes me like really want to play her.
I actually like it's so funny that you talk about bombs. I actually low key think Sasha of Sandikai and Spellfire Cloak are like the mythic bombs.
Yeah. I think so too.
You get to play them every game.
Do you find yourself picking armor or very early, like pick one a lot?
So something we did talk about on this episode too, but like we think Quelling Slippers is worth like a pack and pick one because it's upper uni costs. And then the 2 I just mentioned, Sash and Spellfire, but then also the arm pieces. So like Heat Wave is also like it's just like these cards are like it's so like it's weird because we do come from Magic, but there's no comparison in Magic. It's like so one of my favorite Magic draft formats is called Conspiracy, and it's a format where you get to start with these things called conspiracies that literally just like they are not part of your 30 or your limited deck. You just get to start the game with them. Like one of the most modest ones is this conspiracy that just lets you start for 1/1 defender. Like you just start the game at the beginning of your upkeep, just put in play. That was like literally one of my favorite cards to draft in that format because it was free. You just started with it.
Then the power level ramps up. Like one of them says like if you have more than like a certain number of cards in your deck, all your lands are just like rainbow colored or something.
Yeah. But that's what these equipment are, and so like for me, they are just big bombs. Although the one card I thought about when you said like Flesh and Blood doesn't really have any bombs. Have you ever been like had Soul Reaping played against you in
Yeah,
limited?
also
Like,
pretty good.
like what? So
I do. I think I dislike. I think I dislike Awakening more than I dislike Soul Reaping.
okay.
Awakening is just like I really hated that card in limited. It felt like a pivot turn just on a stick.
Yeah.
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 I felt like that card ended up like most times that I played against me just won the game because it would just like go grab a glacial or something
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
I was just like, ugh.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I actually think I have very rarely picked Awakening.
Yeah. I've
Um,
never.
I
I've had
it
like
mostly sealed, right? It was. I felt like in draft
yeah.
I saw it significantly less, but in sealed because I was usually playing Briar. I was usually playing against like some sort of dinky Wisdom deck, and then like it'd be pretty fair until like it literally wasn't. Or I got like Okanola to be like, but it was mostly Chinama Heroic that I say Awakening was annoying because I think it's like it is annoying, but Chinama
Yeah.
Heroic was a bit more oppressive. It was like, oh come on, like,
Yeah.
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 I
it was
think
like plus 9 value. It's like get out of here.
I think Uprising doesn't have too many cards that are just like egregiously that just like wreck like your whole turn, kind of like Oakenold or Channel Mount Heroic would. I think it feels like it's value. The format feels like a lot of it is value based, but it's like value based over like a much shorter time frame than like WTR games were, if
Makes
that makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, and I feel like I sort of experienced that a bit in sealed too.
Yeah.
Like it felt grindier, but short.
Yeah. There's really just 3 turns.
Yeah.
Or the game is often decided
Yeah.
by end of turn 3, cycle 3. Yeah, I don't feel like there's as many egregious like majestics in the set to be completely honest. In fact, most of the majestics, and this is very Flesh and Bloody, are just like not playable or
Yeah.
just like not good at all.
Yeah.
Like Frightmare is literally not even a real card. Like this, it's just not. Like,
You can attack with a centipede. They like bust it, then you pop your shoes, then you pitch another blue, and then you play the Frightmare.
yeah, it's just 5. Like, yeah, it's just not like a real card. So like, I do actually really enjoy Flesh and Blood because of that.
Mhm.
But yeah, to answer your question, like Sash and Spellfire Cloak are like
Very good. You guys
Sweet.
pick it. You guys, do you pick Arcane Barrier pretty highly? Like, would you even pick like Tide Slippers or
Tide
wait,
Flippers. Yeah,
Tide Flipper? Yeah, that's the
yeah.
ninja run. Right?
Flippers and Stilettos.
Yeah.
I think for Icelander v Icelander, you need to have the chest. That's like non-negotiable. But I think for like the other heroes, like Dromai can get Arcane Barrier through her Ashwings, although Ashwings do have like a pretty big liability when attacking into Icelander. But I feel like the cards are designed in a way such that you actually most of the time like don't really want to Arcane Barrier against Icelander every turn because you're kind of like playing into her game plan where she's just like slowing the game down eventually. Like because you can't like because you can't hit AB3 unless you're playing Dromai, like you're not gonna just like fatigue her out of spells. So she's gonna kill you.
Yeah, I don't value it as highly. Dromai is an interesting space where she has the easiest access to as much arcane barrier as possible, but she has the hardest time pitching for it because her decks are usually like way more skewed towards red. I think like people are telling me I haven't played enough Dromai, but they're telling me like you want like 18, 19 reds. So that means you'll only have like 1 blue in your hand. So if you're pitching reds at AB, it's like such bad value. Faye, I find the flippers actually not bad because a lot of play patterns, like I'll be pitching 2 blues, or I'm trying to get to a state where I'm pitching 2 blues to do all the things on my turn, and I'll usually have like 1 or 2 leftover resources to AB. I board in extra blues against Icelander if I have the flippers, and if I don't, then I'm just gonna do my normal game plan most of the time.
What do you guys think about Oasis or Spite?
Oh,
That card's nuts.
the more I don't get to draft it, which is like every draft now. Every draft we do, I see less of it. The first draft I did, I saw 3, and I passed 2 of them, and I felt so bad. And then this most recent draft, I only ever saw 1. I just snap took it because I was like, oh, I'm never gonna see it again. I was at that point locked in Icelander Pack 3, and Icelander is one of those heroes that kind of makes it look a little bit better because especially if I can use it on the first turn, if you're attacking me, I win second. I gain that extra life. Like these little incremental life point differences are like huge.
I think the
So,
sweet
yeah.
spot. I think the sweet spot is like 2.
Yeah,
I want
especially
like
with 2 Quell.
Yeah, I want like two. I want like the number of Oasis Respites I have in my deck to be equal to the number of Quell armors that I want to use for Quell.
I to be completely honest, I actually kind of started pretty low on Oasis Respite,
Mm-hmm.
and as I've played it more, I just see like the value. Like it's usually like an extra one life. Like you can finagle your way to having an extra one life, pitching that with the blue and Quell and that card. And I don't know about you guys, but like a lot of these games in limited are getting down to the wire where it's like one or two life
Mm-hmm.
differences. So I love it because I think it's like kind of Flesh and Blood design where this set is definitely a set that rewards you for planning out your turns a little bit more. Like you got to plan out your Quell on the opponent's first attack, and I love how like it rewards you for having that like foresight,
Yeah.
that experience. This is definitely not a good like starter set. Like it's not like you if you're a beginner playing this set, you're gonna lose some games to players who just outvalue you with Quell by like with just like a one or two life point difference, and that could be the game right there.
The last topic that I wanted to ask Brendan about was kind of there's a lot of events coming up this summer. There's the Pro Tour in Lily, however you pronounce it, as well as some more callings, as well as a lot of battle hardens that they've announced. Kind of what are your plans for the summer in and out of Flesh and Blood?
Yeah, so it's really interesting actually. So yeah, like previously I've kind of gone to everything and like started scale back in terms of like battle hardens and like the pro quests. I've been playing like, like one, maybe two pro quests a season, like which is kind of a stark difference from traveling to every calling and every battle harden and playing like 5 Road to Nationals or something.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to I think I'm going to scale it back a bit, and I'll play callings in the area, and I think I'm going to play the pro tour, but also like I think I'd want to transfer into like casting.
Oh.
Yeah, I just think it's I think it's like what I'm particularly good at. It's just like talking, to be honest. Like I really like playing. I like competing, but it's just like I don't like not being the best and not feeling like I'm the best. It's not that I have to win. I just have to feel like I can beat anybody in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes with a lot of preparation. And I just wonder how like that's much less scalable than just like being the best commentator, right? And you still get the same lifestyle benefits as well.
Yeah.
You still get to travel.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, you would get paid to travel as well, and then you still get to see all your friends. And like, I think it just blends really well with like the current setup that I have in Flesh and Blood, particularly like with Arsenal Pass.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and then like, it's also like a personalized thing too because we're in a like really interesting time, to be honest, with the current state of like the macro economy.
Yeah.
And like it's already started to affect my businesses like very significantly. And it's not necessarily bad, it just like changes the way I have to approach, and I might have to diversify sort of how I invest my time and like what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it starts like cranking. Because it just started, and I mean this past month has been pretty interesting for me. Like 80% down. I lost like, we lost like 7 figures of investments like commit that was committed. Like it was ridiculous. Which is like seriously, it's like it sounds like much worse than it actually is when it comes to like affecting what we're doing. But at the same time, like cash flow is going to be king and like liquidity will be king as we head into potentially like a bear market, even outside of uh you know this will be a bear like we have real estate, we have like and there's like generational wealth like buy opportunities as well. So like
Oh yeah,
just
definitely.
acquiring as much liquidity as possible to take advantage of the opportunity. It's like the whole reason that I even pay attention to this stuff is all at all is so that when a time like this comes, like I can be ready to take advantage of it, right? Like this is what we all prepare for. Like it's fun when it's a bull market, everybody makes money, but the reason you do that is so when it becomes a bear and there's blood, there's blood in the streets, you go you go in and that's when you buy. So I just want to be prepared for that. I might have to diversify sort of some of my businesses and things like that, but yeah, I just don't know if that meshes well with trying to be the best Flesh and Blood player in the world.
I also see it like with like both in Flesh and Blood, like towards how like people's sentiment towards buying and selling cards, as well as like outside and all of like the just like everything.
Yeah, I'm actually not exiting on any of my collectibles right now, but like if I had more time and And like, I think that it would have been smart to, even now, I don't know what the market looks like right now, but like these past like 2-3 months, probably uh selling a lot and then buying back in like a couple months or something like that, because I think that the collectible market should suffer from the recession, right? Like it should have, but we saw the opposite happen in COVID, so maybe that happens again. Maybe e-com spikes and like, we have collectibles surge again. But I think that overall, yeah, we might be going into like a little bit of a valley.
Yeah. All right. Michael, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, this has been such a pleasure. I I don't know if we didn't tell the full story, but I think one of the reasons why this happened was I went to play in a battle hardened in Dallas, and I flew there from New Jersey. Brendan is based in Dallas, and at that battle hardened, I like lose a round to Alexander Vorontkino, and at the same time, I got a message from the airline that my flight was canceled. It was just like a bad 30-minute stretch, and then Brendan just like sitting across from me, and you don't say anything at first, Brendan, but then like 5 minutes later, you're like, you can come stay with me. I'm like kind of stressed because I've never actually had a flight canceled, and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
like trying to like book another hotel, but like same day hotel night booking is just like a little hard. And you're just like, hey, you can stay over with me. I'm like, because we hadn't really talked
Yeah.
at that
No,
point.
we actually
That was like our
we
first time really
we
ever
had literally had
talking.
not talked, I don't think,
Yeah.
before. I think I said hi to you because
Yeah.
someone said you were there, and like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like, I didn't even like recognize you because I think
I look so much different with glasses, without glasses, and contacts, when I'm
Yeah.
fat, when I'm not. Haircut with no haircut, like I totally get it. So I was just like so like grateful. And then since Brendan and I are actually gonna be like we agreed at that time, or you invited me to play at the Ohio
yeah.
tournament, and I was like, oh yeah, let's be on the same team. For at the time it was gonna be Team Blitz. Now it's Team Uprising Unified Sealed, I guess. And so yeah, I'm so glad that this happened. I'm just grateful. I think that's the coolest part about Flesh and Blood, honestly.
It's the best part by far. That's why I'm okay. Like that's why when I look towards my future plans, like what do I actually love about this game? I love competing, and I think that competition is like very self-actualizing for a person that kind of needs that in their life.
Yeah.
But at the same time, at the end of the day, bottom line is like it's the people. So how do I maximize that, like the EV on people and social experience and like living a life that is fulfilling?
Yeah.
It's like it's not necessarily being the number one and being a competitor. For some people, it will be.
Yeah.
So I think that for me, the path to that is that's why I could switch over into something that's more casting based, or just because I think that fulfills what makes Flesh and Blood special to me.
I don't think that our platform is as big, but I'll be pulling for you to get some gigs at the upcoming events.
Yeah, hopefully. I just need to find a point of contact at the CFB. I've been just going through like some of the other casters so far.
Yeah.
And like I just need to figure out who runs it and then just talk to them, on a call or something.
I'll do some
Maybe
digging. I might know some people.
Oh, yeah, it'd be helpful because I just need to figure out who it is and just talk to
We
them.
just need like a hashtag.
Yeah.
Brendan into the casting booth.
Hashtag free Brendan. I don't know.
Yeah, free me from my competitive commitments and my abilities. It's just like I don't know. I love it, but I'm only interested in competition if I feel like I'm the best and I feel like I can really compete. And I think I can do that with the being surrounded by the right people, with the right amount of time commitment, et cetera, et cetera. Like I think our testing team, if anything, is known for discipline, and like a lot of that organization and sort of system has been built by mostly myself and Hayden as well. And like I think that I'm not as naturally talented as like some people, so I've just supplemented that with systems and people and really good players. Like if there's anything that I can contribute any success to, is being surrounded by amazing players. Right.
The hard work
people push you to be good.
Yeah, I think hard work is definitely a large part of the battle.
Yeah.
All right. Well, our podcast, we're still, I think, working on trying to get on Spotify. But please give us a subscribe on YouTube so that we can become searchable. I don't even think like the notification bell is going to do anything right now. But thanks for listening. Till the next time.
And and we'll see you guys on the next time. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah. Thanks everybody.
Thanks, Brendan.